Today, we are actually going to answer some questions as well. So we'll talk for a little bit here. We got some things to say. What's going on with the week? We're going to talk about NET. We're going to talk about CRISPR, genomics, of course. A little bit of Palantir. Palantir's potential competitor with Big Bear AI, our boy Rising, to close the loop there. But we are going to spend some time here today to actually answer some questions here at the end. So really excited about that. Tony, you're the guy when it comes to stocks. So I don't know if you want to share anything from what you've seen thus far. Obviously, it's only Wednesday, so there's a few more days here left in the week. But if you want to jump in and just kind of welcome everyone to the Pound the Table spaces, that'd be lovely here.
Absolutely, yeah. Welcome everybody. I guess I just want to kind of start out by talking about, I guess, ARK. Honestly, I think a lot of people look to kind of see where the growth names have been going recently, and that's obviously like related to tech and everything, and not the big tech, because that always runs kind of on its own, more market related like S&P 500 and NASDAQ. But I think a lot of people on FinTwit are in those growth names that have been taking a beating for like the last 4 months, but did start to tick up in the middle of May. I think that the CPI data last week or a couple weeks ago, I think it was, the run from there has actually like been very strong. I think the PPI data that came out yesterday, followed by the Fed. I mean, it's just a lot of news that always comes and hits the markets, right? Like there's this whole camp that we have now of, is this transitory or is it, it's going to be here for a long, long time? So, I mean, I honestly can't tell you. I think I saw a chart the other day, it might have been today, of the actual pace of where inflation should have been, if there wasn't any COVID. And it does not seem like it's actually too far off at all. And, you've seen lumber come down from 1700s down to around $1,000. So I think there's a lot of different factors playing in. And I think it takes time for the market to shift through all those different factors and kind of figure out the narrative it wants to play. But in between that, I mean, we're getting day-to-day rotations like insanely. There's half the day we'll get S&P moving up while ARK's moving down. The other half is ARK moving up and S&P moving down. So you're constantly seeing these like mini rotations inside of this broader rotation that's been away from ARK, but starting to be a little bit more towards it, especially as it hit over that 115 level. So for me, I did not obviously love the PPI numbers, but we knew they weren't going to be great. I mean, we were expecting this, but the 10-year obviously shot up like a rocket. I mean, it went down from like 1.43 yesterday or 2 days ago, all the way up to 1.57 or 6 today. So very, very like strong bounce from the lows. But I do think a lot of this is meant to settle out in the near future. I think the rally towards the end of the day, especially in the growth names, like you can see some decoupling again, like that rotation I was talking about. It's kind of a nice setup in the short term, I think, for growth in tech. I think a lot of them were starting to break out, but then they got hit right at the lines they were ready to break out at. And I think that a lot of those things get retested. So I'm not sure if they're going to actually break out this time, but I believe there'll be a lot of retests, Twilio, TTD, Tesla, a lot of those different names that people are looking at might get that retest soon.
So it's hump day. I don't know if you might be too young for this, Tony, but there used to be a great commercial. It's hump day. So it's Wednesday.
I do know it, obviously.
For those of you who don't know, I'm a very elderly man here at 33 years old. What are we looking for? We got Thursday, Friday. Anything that we should be kind of keeping an eye out for?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, just going off of the Fed's movements today, it's never really the first move, right? You saw we had a huge dive right away, and then we had a pop, and then we dove again, and people didn't know which way it was going, right? So I think it'll take some time in the morning to settle that out. I mean, there's always a situation where maybe futures are up a lot or futures are down a lot. Honestly, I don't know what will happen. I mean, I wish I did every single day. But I do think that you're going to see that retest in those growth names to some degree. And also you can see like towards the end of the day, a lot of short interest names were ripping up. So right, like CCIV and Skills had nice pops towards the end of their days. And so I think that we're kind of going on this cycle that rotates between like everything, all these 5 different, like more specific assets. It'll be the short interest or it'll be the crypto. And then you'll go into the meme stocks, which will lead into the CCIV and the Skills, right? So that kind of gets everything going. And we'll go growth or we'll go FANG. And then it just rotates all this way back every week, and it's been this broad trend, right? More and more towards value, but that's been coming down. So I would say look for this retest of ARK to try to break over that 118. Obviously, that was a strong level into this Fed meeting and everything. I think that like news always tells you where potential tops or bottoms can be formed. So I think we'll be able to see a lot better going into like Monday of next week where we'll be headed.
Definitely. And so talking about genomics, everyone's probably had enough of CMLF in terms of just, I know you wrote a 90-page paper on CMLF, SEMA4. We always talk about SEMA4, but for those of you who are unaware, CRISPR had some insane news, one for their company, one for humanity. And I think genomics as a whole,
yeah, I think there's just been so many advancements in the entire space over the last like 3-4 months that people have just been caught up with the, you know, the value narrative, everything that's been going on with inflation and all. The Fed meeting, are they going to raise? But there's been actual like huge leaps in this science in the last like 3-4 months. So another cool thing that happened most recently, which is honestly a huge breakthrough, they've been working towards this for a while, is it's a joint venture between Vertex and CRISPR, and that's designed to treat sickle cell disease and beta thalassemia. Sorry, yeah, I haven't read that word before. So beta thalassemia. So I thought it was more so just for sickle cell, but it is like testing out these new things that have not been even tested in humans yet, right, for clinical trials. So we're finally getting towards a stage where you can actually start to see where the science will be applied to. I think that's very important, right? Because a lot of this seemed like it was just a pipe dream. And so knowing that we're actually making some headway, right, and actually being able to do some type of genomic modification is very, very important, I think, like especially to letting people want to first of all invest in it, which obviously gives them money and gives the funds for the companies to grow, and that's how every company works. But also just to like actually use it and believe in it, right, and make it more available to their patients. So I think seeing these big developments happen is the only way that people are going to really believe that it's possible, because it sounds so far-fetched, right? Like you tell me that you're going to be able to genomically edit a baby in vivo, like that sounds like science fiction from like 2050, but we are moving towards that line more and more every year, and it's just been a lot of advancements. And I'm very long CRISPR. I think that Matt Haruni, honestly, I sold out of CRISPR I guess a couple months ago. And Matt Haruni got me back into it, saying, well, like honestly, this is, even though like there's base editing and there's prime editing and there's a lot of different proteomics is like now in the markets, you can invest in companies that specifically do that. CRISPR is like the base case for that double-stranded breaking DNA, the entire therapy. So, and they're obviously been working on things for many, many years. So, I'm long CRISPR. I'm looking forward to seeing, see how far this goes through the FDA trials and if it can go all the way through. I'm very bullish on genomics. I'm a big fan of it overall.
Yeah, it's incredible. This whole genomics, I know we kind of always pound the table on genomics because it's the future. And it's funny because I sent you that book, Physics of the Future, and half the shit's already been accomplished since he wrote it a few years back. And it's pretty phenomenal to see. I mean, I just saw it too. I was just Googling to see what else CRISPR was up there. And they're now like tackling ALS as well. So like genomics is a space that is, it is far-fetched. A lot of people think that, hey, it's never happened. Same with Tesla back in the day. Obviously, very different type of thing. But it's incredible to see how much money is being now starting to be poured in, which is going to actually affect our lives much more than on e-commerce or Amazon.
Right. Yeah. It's like that thing where like when you learn a new word, you hear that word all the time, right? You didn't actually just start hearing that word more. You just noticed it, right? And I think that like now that I've been so deeply like involved and invested in genomics, I've been seeing it almost everywhere in my life. Right? Like I hear friends of mine using SEMA4, and like I hear like a ton of people. There's a much larger space on Twitter than you would think for the genomic community and everything that goes into it, right? And when I say genomics, it's like a horrible blanket statement for all the things that these companies do, but I think it's just the easiest way to lump it all in without getting too specific and boring people. But I'm very bullish genomics. Yeah, I think it's definitely something to watch. Like, it's happening now. So it's 5-10 years now. What the hell? Right. Not going towards the future. Yeah, it could take a decade. It probably will take a decade to see some really meaningful change, and that's okay. But I think that we're already making big strides today, and I want to be invested in something when it's happening versus like, once again, like now we see Teslas all over the road. But I remember when I first invested in Tesla, and I had to wait 3 years before even hearing about like anyone else in my town having one. Yeah. And we'll talk about this more on for those of you who are new, like we run this podcast. Sorry, go ahead, Riley.
I just want to say that for someone who doesn't really, I didn't know much about genomics like last year, and just, over the last, 6 months, I've kind of got to dig in, and just from what I've seen and what I see in these results, to me, it feels like we're kind of going into like the next industrial revolution, or even like the next internet. I feel like the comms for genomics is just something so massive that, we're just starting. I feel like maybe 20 years down the road, we're going to look back and be like, wow, genomics really just, extended people's lives,
Wow, how did people die?
Exactly.
Wow, exactly, and that's how it should be, and that's what we should strive for as a society. So
yeah, it's definitely a great space, and it's a meaningful space. Again, going back to like e-commerce was a big boom. There's been many EVs, obviously a big boom, but like genomics, at least for me personally, this is gonna save our relatives. This is gonna save our friends. Obviously, there's some like things back and forth. There's going to be probably some things within the government that will have to, go through the bureaucracies and whatnot. But this is definitely my favorite overall kind of theme coming up, because how powerful this meeting can be for the world and for us as friends.
Yeah.
Switching gears just real quick.
Hey, Avi, before we switch gears.
Oh, my man, Dom's got something to say.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, no, I really think we got to also look at what has driven the costs down. Like, look at where we're at now prior 10, 15 years ago with CRISPR. Technology is moving so fast from a compute perspective and from a cost perspective to sequence a genome, it's only going to get cheaper. So what does that tell us? Well, if it's only going to get cheaper, and we know that compute and hardware is only going to get better and faster because of the demand that we have for that, now is a great time to get in before everyone catches on. Now, it's hard to tell who's going to be a clear winner. I like the idea of a basket approach in this perspective for myself, but definitely this is an area of expertise. You have to do your own due diligence, lean on experts, listen to interviews. Definitely this is the place to do your homework. And I think also there's a lot of institutional investing and big money, even retail investing, that's not in genomics right now, because it is so complex to understand. And so if it's too complex, and I know, Tony, we've had conversations around this, people would rather just go to something simpler and understand it, which is, I totally understand. I get that. Like, you want to make sure you're able to articulate why you're investing in something, why do you believe in something, and where you think it's going to go. But I would encourage everyone, this is going to happen. We don't know exactly who the winners are going to be, but even for your own sake and for your family's sake, to understand the possibilities from a health is wealth perspective.
Dom, can I venture? Can I venture to guess you're an ARKG by the way you're just? You want to do hard?
I watch a lot of Cathie, but then I still do my own basket. So I hold CRISPR, I hold CMLF. If anyone follows me on Twitter, they know I'm huge on Fulgent genetics. I think the whole industry is totally discounting what they're capable of doing, and they're not just a COVID stock. BLFS is a great picks and shovel for genomics. But there's there's a lot of good things out there, and I'm really interested to see what Ginkgo it'll be DNA once it's all done. It'll be go ahead.
So that's so tough. I just had to jump in here. It's so tough for me because I get asked about SRNGU Ginkgo like once a day at least, and so like obviously the company's phenomenal. If the company was at a $4 billion valuation, yes, I'd be invested in it. It's 15+ billion valuation, making 150 million a year, and I get how they're going to be making money. I get they're going to be making these partnerships. They get royalties for X years. They're locked in for like 7 years, something. I understand.
No, I get it. I get it, Tony. Like, I'm right there with you.
Pricey,
like,
man.
I'm waiting.
And I love Twist.
Yeah.
So Twist, I think is like actually cheap. I mean, it's like 20. Like maybe it's far cheaper. I think it's like 5 times cheaper. And they don't do the exact same thing, but they do roughly the same thing. But like just SRNGU DNA is far more oriented on I guess the data component side of it, which and that's why it's got the valuation.
Yeah.
No, I would agree. And we want to see some of these stocks perform for a year, right? We don't have to get in right away because there are going to be market pullbacks. So then when you get something in like a DNA or once it officially merges to be the ticker DNA. Then we can see when a good price to get in and a good value is too. And after it's proven after a couple of earnings, but perspective, it definitely is interesting and intriguing with some of the different ones out there.
Yeah, and I just want to add one more thing before we move on. So the only issue I think the main issue with genomics right now is less so far like the science and like what they're doing. Because I think if you just take it at the root of the science, then they're doing very, very incredible things. And if you look at their revenues and their like multiples and their valuations and everything, like none of them are really supposed to heat up. I'm talking about like the beams, the MTLAs, the CRISPRs, the twists. Those are not really supposed to heat up until 2024, 2025 in terms of like making a ton of cash, right? But there's a lot of companies that are in bio, like just in the health industry that other people invest in, right? And a lot of that's predicated on them like producing a good drug, right? Like Bib was held up for so long because 8 years they worked on an Alzheimer's treatment. So there's that factor into the revenues and the multiples, I think, that people just overlook. And so, like, yes, of course, they're pricey. They're actually stupid priced. But, like, that's if you're looking just strictly numerically. But then assume, like, these are the only guys who are, like, not the only, but the leaders. I mean, the far leaders in the space that if all 5 of those big boys don't figure out one drug or cure one mutation or solve one problem in the human body, then, like, no, who will, right? So I think that those 5 have the potential to do something that nobody else can now. And so that's what you're playing for, because you don't know what the cost of that's going to be because it's like not happened yet, right? Like what if CRISPR goes through and officially cures sickle cell anemia? Like, does that not give it value, right? Like, so those are the things I guess to consider. And that's why I pound the table on SEMA4 so much, because while all that's going on, they're just going to be caking by collecting the tests to help those companies develop those expensive R&D drugs. But SEMA4 is just going to profit every single day of the week. And after they make the drugs, SEMA4 gets a cut of all that they made by working with them to help design the drugs from their data. So that's why I talk about it so much, because if we talk about any of them, like it will.
Well, it's less risky.
It's true picking shovels. Yeah.
It's less risky. The data, they're focused on the data. And what do we know about data? Everyone, we know that it's going to continue to expand exponentially. Can't argue the fact. And so if they're going to be one of the leaders and they're already getting all these partnerships with all these hospitals and healthcare systems, they're going to have the first mover advantage. And so whoever has the most data with the best AI is going to be able to make the best decisions that turn into drugs and discovery.
100%. And when they turn that into drugs and discovery, which they will, like that's going to be the real moneymaker, because for as long as those drugs are making money, they're making money. And until they're doing that, they're figuring out how to do that, right? So everyone will pay them at some degree to do this. Also, I just want to touch on this for a second, and I always just I'll go back to SEMA4 because it's like my largest holding now, and I don't really care. But basically, they just announced like on this transcript from their most recent earnings report where they hit estimates that were going to be for the entire 4 years, right? So 65 million for quarter one. Their entire 2021 is 265, right? So that's 1/4. So they're, as long as if they don't grow $1 for the next 4 quarters, they hit their estimates from their sheet. And that's not factoring in what Eric Schadt slipped up on when he was talking on the transcript. I don't know if he slipped up or he just hasn't announced it yet, but there's an additional partnership that they haven't announced with Avera Health. And in the SPAC paper, he said they had 10 million patients. Then in the most recent report with their earnings, they said 11.5. Then when he was talking, he's like, we actually have access to about 20 million patients, which will not source all right now, but over time we will. So it's just the world's biggest sandbag I could possibly think of. And I just wanted to touch on that after digging through their entire report.
So, and not to beat the genomics piece down. Sorry,
no, keep going, man.
One last piece here. Is with the other drug discovery leader out there who actually has partnerships with all 30 major pharmaceutical drug companies, and that's Schrodinger. Another Bill Gates Foundation funded or supported company. He owns over 10% of the company. And you look at what they're doing with their physics-based model software and their high gross margins as a software as a service data analytics company, they are able to speed up the drug creation and discovery process in major amounts of years. We're talking like the last one with Amgen took over, I think, 20 plus years to get to finally approval. They're taking 2 decades worth of stuff and pushing it down into single digits of years or less. And so you think about what that does for the medical and genomics field moving forward and getting new drugs out to market. And they also have in their own discovery that they're doing on their side. So not only are they getting royalties from all these different pharmaceuticals, including the $2.7 billion partnership they have with Bristol Myers, but they also have their own. So if they get a couple of their own homegrown drugs done, that could be a lot bigger than a $4.5 or $5 billion company.
Yo, Avi, just before we move to the next stage, we have Nat here.
I know, I was looking at him. I was like,
get him in here.
Stage.
He's
got a backwards hat on. He might be hanging out. Nat, raise your hand.
Yeah, he's got to tell me about. You need to tell me what he thinks about Beam.
We're gonna invite him on.
Beam. I need to hear Beam.
Yep.
In David Liu, we trust.
He is the guy who got me back into CRISPR. I hope you heard that. So, yeah, I mean, I would love to hear his thoughts. Pete follows him so closely. Nat, you got to speak, man.
Cool. On board. So now we're just gonna keep inviting you to speak.
Yeah, either
Here it goes. Here it goes. It worked.
Oh.
What's up, guys? I did not expect to speak. I did not expect to speak. I actually wasn't. I didn't even. I mean, I totally forgot you guys were speaking tonight.
This is like that Eminem moment, dude. Are you gonna capture it, or are you gonna let it slip? You know.
I'm actually working on a Substack right now. I was listening to you guys in the background. I'm actually well, the plan was to post something about CRISPR Therapeutics tonight. But yeah, what do you guys want to know about Beam? I mean, I don't know what you guys have been talking about. I kind of joined a couple minutes ago.
Yeah, no, we were talking about like CRISPR. We were going through the CRISPR and the most recent sickle cell news that came out of CRISPR, and then we started diving into genomics randomly, and then we saw you, so we're like, we got to talk about Beam. And then
I want to hear Beam.
because I was talking I was talking about how I got out of CRISPR to get into Beam and NTLA, and then once again I realized I needed to have all three.
Yeah. So actually, what's really cool about Beam is their technology is also so versatile that what they're actually doing is, so they're going to try and tackle thalassemia and sickle cell too, but what they're going to be doing is contrary to what CRISPR Therapeutics is doing, which is silencing the I forget what the name of the exact gene. It's like BCL11A or something like that. So if you knock that gene out, what you're doing is you stop suppressing the fetal hemoglobin. So you're allowing the fetal hemoglobin to start working again. It's activated instead of where your adult hemoglobin is not really working anymore. So that's what they're doing. But what Beam is doing is they're actually doing the same thing. So they're going to be activating that fetal hemoglobin and try to get it to work again as well. But they're also tackling it a different way. So they're doing two approaches. So the second approach is actually to go in and fix the actual point mutation. So I think the mutation is like an A to a G. It's just a single letter. So they're going to be doing both, and the trial is going to be really cool. So we're going to see actually which method probably works better. And I think that they'll probably use the more efficacious trial and bring that to market, or they could bring both to market. I have no idea. But Beam is super cool because their technology is so easy to use that they can do things like that.
And
what's your number one genomics player? Is it Beam or
Yeah, so I think Beam is about like, which it's definitely over 25%. It's somewhere like 25 to 30%. And that's my entire genomics, out of my entire genomics portfolio.
All right, I think he did. So let's turn this over to Rahul to give us a little talk about NET then.
Hey, what's up, guys? Nat, what's up, brother? I think Beam and CMF is all I own, so I always talk to them about that. This is awesome hearing from him. Thanks for jumping on. But yeah, switching gears a little bit to NET. Before I dive into the stuff, I just need to talk about edge computing because we hear like buzzwords all the time. Like you hear genomics, you hear like AI, you hear automation, you hear all these like cool words. They sound awesome, and it's just like everyone should understand like the baseline definition of what it is before you even invest. So I'm just going to read it out loud. Like it sounds boring, but like I want to do this because like you need to understand this, right? So edge computing is pretty much processing data locally, and cloud computing is more about processing data on data center or public cloud. So simply put, edge computing is the practice of capturing, processing, and analyzing data to where it's created. Another reason why I love the company is some people realize it, some people don't. If you like Ethereum, you'll definitely understand why I say this. Is like the internet wasn't built for where we are today, right? Like reading simply from like the Cloudflare S1, originally conceived as a decentralized wired network to interconnect academic institutions. The internet has evolved into a global platform for business and communications, hosting a wide variety of often mission critical applications. While the internet is brilliantly architected to deliver fault tolerance and robust connectivity, it is not designed to deliver the secure millisecond performance and ability required now to become the lifeblood of a business and primary vehicle of commerce and communication for society. So Matthew Prince is pretty much on a mission to build a company that will allow people to scale at a very safe and fast network. I compared it to Twilio and the features that it's building because Twilio rolled out something called Twilio Flex, right? And that's how it got into like the contact center business, right? So these companies that power developers, they learn from their customers, and that's how Twilio was able to get Shopify to move their entire contact center in 6 weeks through Twilio Flex, right? So it's not just a one-stop shop. They build features, they learn from their customers, and they continue to expand, right? And one of the goals that Matthew Prince has talked about is having a $1 billion application built on his like service or on his network, right? So it's at a $30 billion valuation now. Of course, it's expensive, right? Like cloud name like this, it's relatively new, limited competition. You don't know how Microsoft, Amazon, all these big players are going to come in and compete. But like with the edge, it's complicated, right? Like setting up architecture and having companies trust you and move their services. It's not a simple requirement. I actually want these bigger companies to come and compete because it validates what they're trying to do. And like, you know, if you miss names like Crowd, Zscaler, like this gives you the perfect blend of like a network delivery cloud service along with something that's kind of secure and provide cybersecurity to a certain extent. And I'll end it with numbers. I know last week on AI research, US said they're spending $250 billion, which I think is awesome. Their numbers from Q1 was 77% gross margins. They finished 2020 with $431 million in revenue, and they finished Q1 2021 with $138 million in revenue. They also were able to take their high, like 100K revenue customers from 336 in Q1 2019 to 945 in Q1 2021. And if you look at that compared to the fund ownership, same time period, September 2019 was 145, March 2021 was 857. I guarantee by end of June, we're looking at 1,000, if not very close to it. And the last thing I'd like to say is Clayton Christensen, if anyone's not heard of him, he's kind of like the person that's come up with this theory of disruptive innovation. He was a teacher at Harvard Business School for quite some time. He's been a mentor to Matthew Prince, someone that he's learned from very closely. One of the 3 books that Amazon tells its executives to read were written by Clayton Christensen. Like this guy has really there's 2 types of companies. There's companies that disrupt, there's companies that sustain and innovate, right? So I think he's in there to like really disrupt and create a powerhouse for years to come. I think, like the amount of cybersecurity attacks we've seen have only increased, and a company like this is absolutely a must. And I think I was talking to Tony about this, and I'll stop it right there, is, this is a company that's highly priced right now, right? It's like a 95 bucks. It's close to all-time highs. And I was talking to him a couple months ago, or last month, and I was telling him like a couple months ago, I was looking at the VWAP and volume shelf, and it was at 66. So I was able to like start my position when they partnered with NVIDIA at 77 and scale all the way down into a full-size position because I knew those technicals, right? So I think, like, I don't want someone to go and buy this company tomorrow because I wouldn't preach that. I wouldn't buy it myself. But what I want you to do is understand what the company's doing, then look at technicals and see where you can build that entry and average in, right? Like I like dollar cost average, and I started my position in the 70s and I was able to buy at 66 very comfortably because of stuff that Tony's talked about many times with VWAPs, right? So like, I think it's something that everyone should be doing when they are trading or investing, right? Like as Tony says, we're invaders, right? Like even if you're not trading, you're investing. If you're investing, you should try to find the best way to get into a stock, right? Don't just try to buy high and then it's down 20% and emotions get the best of you.
Bro, I love when people just preach what I've learned over like so many years is that I was talking to you about this not 2 hours ago. I love Net as a company, fantastic. I was buying Net when it was 19. I remember the first earnings run where it like gapped up. It was like 22 and then it ran to the 30s. And I remember selling it like in the 50s and the 60s because I thought it was getting pricey. But here's the thing, like those pricey software names are really some of the strongest names out here in the entire market. So it's hard for me because I was just saying this to you and Don a couple hours ago, that there's really no stocks that I'm like super excited about their valuation. Like there's some that I'm like, yeah, that's really good. Like I think Etsy's pretty cheap, but like I was looking at Baba yesterday. I know Patrick as well. He looks at it as well. And it is so cheap. Like these things are cheap, but there are risks that make it cheap.
Yeah, dude, and I 100% agree with you, man. We've talked about it so much, and like the entire market's like that, right? Like this is the thing where people sit down and give up. You guys come to that 40 in September. I'll put the episode. I'll pull an audio draft if they want. Again, I'll find it. I'll get it.
And that's why we actually, this is when all the Fastly stuff was going on, right? And that's something to point out. Like there's a lot of stocks that I know are being like talked about on Twitter right now, and they have like a severe concentration risk. Like someone tried to call out CMLF for having concentration risk, but it's not having one revenue source. It's about having a couple big customers that make up your entire revenue source, right? So like, and that was the issue with Fastly. And like, I'm not bullish or bearish Fastly. I don't even follow it anymore. But I remember at the time there was so much going on with TikTok that I had sold out of Fastly, and I was like, Net is a far better play. And then it was really interesting because at the same time, that's when Net started doing all that they did. They had the partnership, and everything was going on for them. And that's when that huge spike happened in the 50-60 range.
Exactly.
And that's what.
And like one more thing, like even through September through December, you had it based from 50, and then January to now, like 60 really, even with this whole volatility.
Yeah, and I was tying the table on it in that range. I remember having like January 55 calls on it, and they just were going nowhere for months. And like, obviously, had I held, those would have been sweet. But I did have stock at the time. I just think that even now, though, like I was looking at the valuation, right? It is pricey. But once again, like Crowd is one of the strongest stocks in this market, and Crowd is pricey, like no matter how you look at it. But I get it. Like those things command a higher multiple because of their margins, because of all these different reasons, right? Like they're not as impacted by all these different trends that are hitting the other growth stocks. But still, like it is pricey. So like those things I'm like looking at, like if we can get a drop in software, like IGV is like a good ETF to look for that. If I could get a nice drop in that, I would accumulate a lot of those names. But once again,
one thing I just want to jump in. Can you guys hear me? Because you said I was coming.
Yeah, no, I can hear you now.
Yeah, we
okay. One thing I would say, I've been in software sales now for like 10 years. I've been in like MarTech, so marketing technology, which is not necessarily. I don't think it's a need to have. It's a nice, ultimately it's a nice to have. It is a need to have, if you want to survive and continue to go. But like these cybersecurities are not even a need to have. They're like you have to completely sell it. This you can have a business if someone comes in and turns around your business. Like these, like they definitely do have high valuations, but like I think they're warranted in the sense that you need to have this as a company because there's attackers out there.
Fastly going down, causing outages is what made it rally. Then I remember, I understand the necessity of them. I mean, Shopify as well, right? Like you have companies that are coming public from being a Shopify store, so that means
like obviously Tony said, like I mean, a lot of stocks I look at the portfolio, these are founder-led companies, mission-driven. Like their mission is to build a better internet. It's simple as that. It's such a powerful statement, and they're doing it for like 12, 13 years, right? It's not like a new company that's coming out with a fresh IP 5 years into this and been there for a while, building and creating a business that's going to be there for a while. So you look at Fast, that's such management shit, right? Like their CEOs beat the CFO for like 2 straight quarters. They had like issues their last quarter reporting. So like, look, like these are things that you should be looking at. And like, even if you want to be in the CDX, so you don't, you have to compare a company A to B and see what's better and see what fits the bill and it's going to be the long-term winner. At least like with my time horizon, I'm looking 3 to 5 years. Right. For Tony's like, but again, it depends on what type of investor you are. As Dom always like, DD and the right to pound because you know what you're talking about.
You know what? I'm going to have to change my opinion and say that platform may be a need to have because like 100% because you all the McDonald's internet you got going on here.
This is Dominic. I just want to jump in here too. There's some things that I think we also want to look at on this company besides valuation and everything. It is at a high price right now, but if you don't have a position and if you do understand the company and you have done your DD, it's a great company to get at any point. Why would I say that? Well, because once again, what do we know about data? It's growing exponentially, and it's 60 to 65% of it will be at the edge here within the next 5 years. Okay, so there's really only two major players in the industry with edge computing, and that's Cloudflare and that's Fastly. Cloudflare started before Fastly. Cloudflare is looking to be the catch-all for the entire internet, and you run on their network, right? The reason why they can do so many new releases of new products is because they brilliantly targeted the freemium model and modeled after a lot of other companies like MongoDB, who's done this as well, getting the software in the developers and in the IT admins' hands for a freemium model, and then giving them still good production use cases, but then for other features, they then have to become a paying customer. They have over 225,000 customers in SMB, okay? They also have a large amount of enterprise customers in the Fortune 500. But what that allows them to do is constantly have this rotating customer base of new products that they can push out. And what they're doing is they're also targeting these freemium customers and allowing them to use the new products that they want to release that are not in full production mode, that are beta. They're letting them test the beta software so they can get feedback from the customers for free and get it tailored to what it needs to be like. And then that ultimately allows them to go faster than the competition, expanding on their platform, which gives them that net revenue expansion rate that's so good.